Come here, sit on my lap and I'll tell you a story. Once there was a little lad just like you. He was naughty, he was bad, just like you. He disobeyed and misbehaved the whole day through. He was unkind and wouldn't mind, just like you.
I've heard some rumblings that being fat is apparently a choice. Quarantine has amplified weight loss discourse, which makes sense to me. Our lives have been disrupted in really big ways. Circumstances outside of our control have forced us to turn to coping mechanisms just to get by. Naturally, weight gain is gonna be a part of that. I'm gonna cleanse your palates and turn to some other internet people to get their opinions on this, because we are bound to find well-researched and nuanced opinions this way. Let's start with Blair White. What do you think about this? After nobly reminding us that shaming fat people and giving anyone unsolicited advice on how to modify their bodies is wrong, Blair says,
"It takes so much more self-love to pick yourself up and say, I need to make a positive change for my own life and for the people who love me in my life." That's so much more self-love than just eating yourself into obesity and telling yourself this is fine. But that's also why body shaming people and treating overweight and heavyset and obese people badly is also counterproductive. You can't make someone feel like crap. You have to empower people, and that's how you make a positive change. Health officials will talk all day how you need to stay at home, live in fear, all of that. But at the end of the day, why is there not more of an incentive on teaching people how to boost their immune systems? How to, do exercises that help them become more fit? Here in California, like, gyms are closed. They've been closed since the very start, but liquor stores, fast food, it's all thriving. I would much rather see people in the gym and being allowed to go to the gym right now than seeing lines outside of hot dog stands, which is the case here all over the place.
This is fascinating to me because the person who became the face of quarantine guilt workouts this past year was Chloe Ting. Her workout videos, thumbnailed with her flat six-pack stomach and her diet recommendations for clean eating, have gained literally billions of views over the past year and a bit. It's hard for me to believe or even understand Blair's perspective that the body positivity movement, which aims to de-emphasize the role of weight loss in health, has somehow exceeded the volume and aplomb of fitness and dieting culture. It seems like most people want to look like Chloe Ting to me. I mean, sure, body positivity is more visible than it was 10 years ago, but is there a mass of fat people who need what Blair calls tough love? Let's get another voice in here. Here's Joe Rogan.
I accept all kinds of unhealthy choices, but don't lie to me. Just don't lie about the physical reality of what you've done to your body if you reach 400 pounds. That's not healthy. You're saying it's healthy. You're saying it's okay. No, you're just not dead yet. To just go on about this fat acceptance movement and, the big, beautiful this and that. And no, you're obese. You've eaten too much food. If you see a fat guy, how come he doesn't get the same sort of treatment? If you see a morbidly obese man in his underwear, no one's saying he's beautiful. Because he's disgusting, and he's fat, and he's lazy, and he's addicted to food. We all know it.
Joe Rogan is very passionate about the subject of fat acceptance. He had this individual on his show, a physician named Peter Attia, I think I'm pronouncing that right, to talk about obesity.
I know we love to beat up on fat people. We love to turn it into a character defect, but I gotta tell you, virtually every fat person that I know or that I've taken care of, they are not disproportionately eating more than their peers. In some cases, yes, but not on balance. The problem is that they simply do everything incorrectly metabolically. So their body is functioning incorrectly. Yeah.
Amazingly, Peter says that he doesn't focus on weight loss in his work. People's efforts to lose weight can be thwarted by their endocrinology. Cortisol, a hormone that's emitted when your body's under stress, makes you retain fat.
They just can't lose weight. And I watch what they're doing, and they're doing everything right, but they just can't lose weight. But then you notice their cortisol levels through the roof. It's hard to get rid of fat when you have lots of cortisol.
So for these people that are having the issue with cortisol levels, that's exacerbated by stress, right?
Yes.
So stress actually exacerbates your weight gain.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's interesting. You
Yeah.
could literally eat the same diet and gain more weight because of stress.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Don't be fooled by Joe's amiable demeanor here. He had this conversation 5 months before he called fat men disgusting. Many of the core tenets of the body positivity movement actually jive with what Peter is saying here, namely that you shouldn't focus on weight loss and not all bodies function the exact same way. Maybe that's why some commenters accused Peter Attia of making up excuses, and I've spent enough time in fitness communities to be able to make an educated guess about why. People like to say calories in, calories out as a shorthand for the argument that if you just keep these calories of the food that you're taking in lower than the calories that you're expending through your activities, you're gonna lose weight. After hearing that for your, entire life, you're bound to be a little skeptical when you're faced with somebody who's an expert in dietary sciences telling you that it's actually a bit more complicated than you've been led to believe. Now, I'm just a humble nobody from the internet. I'm not gonna pretend that I know anything more than anybody else about maximizing your gains. Pains. More like, I'm calories out. Am I right, ladies? The growing concern over fat phobia, that is, discrimination against people on the basis of their size, elicits colorful responses. Many people will actually proudly claim that they are fat phobic because the alternative, I guess, is to promote being unhealthy. However, many of us, myself included, never actually feel the need to look at the science behind obesity because what we feel we know seems so obvious that it barely warrants investigation. When I do feel that way, I know that I have to do a little research because 9 times out of 10, I'm mostly incorrect when I haven't done the work. And the bit that is correct is only that way if you loosely interpret the facts. In this video, I won't be disputing that being overweight, fat, obese, or super obese can lead to a higher risk of adverse health outcomes. In fact, because I know that I'm going to be drawing the ire of the Instagram, TikTok, YouTube gym rats from their sewer headquarters, let me just say that again with less words. At no point in this video will I be saying that obesity is healthy. I won't even imply it, alright? So let's just fucking relax here. Get yourself an ice pack. I've got one underneath my butt. It really helps during this heat wave. I'm more interested in 2 related topics that seem to be governing attitudes towards fat people. The first is the obesity epidemic. That is, the sudden and rapid increase in the proportion of the population that's considered obese in English-speaking countries and the way that's pathologized. That is to say, I'm going to be thinking about obesity as a matter of public health. 2, I'm going to talk about where and why we make the leap between a public health issue to judgments about people's character. I'm going to talk about why we make the leap from being fat to being lazy, or in other words, why we start talking about morality after talking about people's bodies. Too long, didn't listen? This video is about the way that we talk to and about fat people. Enjoy! North American diets have been high in sugar content for a long time. Even so, what we call the obesity epidemic didn't really gain traction until the 1970s. The last 30 years in particular have seen the proportion of the population that's considered to be obese double to triple. Why? How? Did everybody just start deciding to make bad choices? Did they choose to do that? Well, epidemiologists, people who study population health, don't really think about illness and wellness that way. Supposedly, almost 2 billion people in the world are considered obese, so it seems like you miss a big part of the picture by just thinking about obesity on a case-by-case basis. For example, epidemiologists are interested in something called a food desert and the effect that it has on people's bodies. This is a name for an area where supermarkets, places that sell healthy foods, are not easily accessible. They're inaccessible because they're out of walking distance, and most people in the neighborhood do not have cars to drive to the next nearest place where there would be a supermarket. Instead, what you'll usually find in a food desert is an abundance of fast food restaurants, lots of convenience stores full of processed foods, and fatty hot dog stands. So how does this happen? How are there no supermarkets in a neighborhood? I've never lived anywhere where I haven't been able to walk to Safeway. Well, sometimes it's because of companies' biases, they don't want to set up shop in a poor neighborhood because they are worried that the poors are going to steal all their stuff. And that's because food deserts primarily happen in poor neighborhoods. In rural areas, food deserts can form because of, logistical reasons. It just doesn't make sense if there's not enough people around to open a Costco full of perishables. Food deserts have created something called the obesity paradox. In English-speaking countries, lower income groups tend to have a higher prevalence of obesity and diabetes. So, a higher rate of obesity or diabetes tends to correlate with food deserts, because people's diets are just unlikely to be healthy if all that's around for them to eat is unhealthy food. From the great city of Saskatoon to the hardy Appalachian Mountains, what unites us all is being more likely to have diseases if you have no money. In the US, there tends to be a higher prevalence of obesity and diabetes in Hispanic and Black communities. That is, there's more obese people in these communities than we would expect based on the numbers in the general population. Which makes sense, because these communities are also more likely to be poor because of, racism. In the States, the proportion of the population that's considered obese is like closer to 40%, whereas for the Black population, this number increases to close to 50%, and it's a little bit less for the Hispanic population. Now, some of you are very smart and think faster than I talk, so you might be wondering, well, if these places are so unhealthy to live in, then why don't people just move to somewhere where they can afford to buy healthier foods? And if some individual comes to you asking for financial advice, go ahead and recommend that to them. As a healthcare policy for the government, though, just recommending that people move away from, like, Atlanta because they're too fat and you want them to buy more fruits and vegetables is, like, kind of cringy. No matter where you live, there can be some initial costs to move that can be prohibitive. And there are reasons why you might not want to leave your neighborhood even if it's not the best place to live. Like, if most of your friends and family are there, they can guarantee emotional support or even support in childcare that you just couldn't find if you moved to an entirely new town. I'm almost 26 and I stay in my hometown because my mom makes me soup. At the same time, we also have to consider how these communities got there in the first place. In particular, communities that are predominantly populated by people of color tend to have formed because government's racist policies shuffled them around for decades, and that's just where people have been since then. So just imagine for a second how it might look if a governing body like that of the United States of America, with a record of historically racist policies and forcing migration on specifically Black and brown populations, was suddenly just like, why don't you just get the fuck out of here? So that's my preachier reason for not recommending that kind of thing. At the same time, there are practical problems with it. Particularly, that not all places that are affordable to live are survivable or have an array of nutritious foods available to the denizens of the place. I forgot what my script said. That's what happens when I go off script. In English-speaking countries, and especially in North America, moving to a more affordable place might just mean moving between food deserts. So, okay, if living in a food desert seems to correlate with higher rates of obesity, what can we do to turn these places into food oases? The answer tickled my sensibilities. I don't think I should use that word. Seriously, epidemiologists suggest granting people labor rights, providing secure working conditions and compensating them properly. That's seriously it. That actually squares with what Peter Attia says about stress. If people aren't having to worry about the most stressful thing, which is money troubles, then they might lose weight. Long and sedentary work hours also just leave people with very little time to cook for themselves or to live active lifestyles. The thing that was so exciting for me was that solving wealth inequality is good for everybody, and if that's the key to solving the obesity epidemic, then well, just sign me up, dude. Let's just fucking get rid of wealth inequality. I love it! Imagine if no matter where people lived, they were able to survive and thrive. Imagine if solving wealth inequality actually addressed health crises. And that's not to say that it's simple to implement. Part of the process is gonna involve bringing food in closer proximity to poor communities, and that might require that we incentivize supermarkets to set up shop in food deserts. Now hang on a second there, girl. That sounds like a really quick and easy fix. If we just let Walmart set up in a food desert, everything will be good. I should say that epidemiologists actually caution against this line of thinking. Why? What could be wrong with this brilliance? Well, it's fucking gentrification is what it is. It's copying and pasting white middle-class suburbia onto poor neighborhoods and going, yeah, that'll fix it. Fixing poverty isn't like chemistry where you add 2 mole supermarkets and get healthy living. All that's certain about bringing a supermarket into a food desert is that you would enrich a corporation even further. Okay, probably the topography of these neighborhoods will have to change a little bit in order to make room for these different food distribution networks, but is just bringing Target more money the only way to do that? Long-term solutions to food deserts will come through gaining food sovereignty, that is, independence in the production and distribution of our food. How that looks is going to change depending on the community and the culture, but we can think of at least 2 examples for making that happen. Community gardens are a popular suggestion because they give people free and easy and, well, obviously affordable access to the food that they're eating. Farmers markets also provide local unprocessed foods to the community, and that way, money flows within the community to people who need it, and not out of the community to another big corporation. No matter what's done to try to lift people out of poverty, the important thing is to actually work with the people in these communities, and to not just be like, let's give Walmart more money. I like thinking about how different things could be because it's a reminder that not everything is set in stone. It's set in concrete and rebar. Of course, these are just small solutions, and they're very unlikely to substitute for the convenience of a supermarket anytime soon. At the same time, what is the future if it's just up to some big corporation to determine, you know? Now, we've moved on away from actually talking about fat people, and that's for a good reason. I'm really worried about how little this conversation actually shifts to look at the food production and distribution end of things. People are making cruel jokes about the relationship between obesity and, like, coronavirus outcomes. Like, haha, now fat acceptance is finally defeated because obese people died of COVID.
Because what's been funny, because they took a huge L with the pandemic, because, like, this shit started, and they're like, the people that are mainly at risk are big fatzos.
Yeah.
And they've spent the last, like...
Big type of bitches.
Yeah. They've spent the last couple of years... cheese lighting people into believing that
cheese lighting.
Yeah. Well, that's when a fat person is trying to trick you.
Yes, dying of the plague is the same as taking an L. That's how I would describe the global loss of life. The stuff in the food that we eat hasn't always been this bad for us. According to this study, in the 1970s, soft drink companies in the US substituted regular old-fashioned, good old-fashioned sugar with high fructose corn syrup. Why does that matter? Well, fructose decreases your sensitivity to insulin, the thing that you need to digest sugar. This is diabetes juice? So of course we can try to understand increased consumption habits on a population level from the perspective of individual choices and responsibility. However, we're still left with a really important, unanswered question. Why is it that during an obesity epidemic, when we're seeing record high rates of diabetes, have soft drink companies been continually allowed to use an ingredient that's been known to contribute to diabetes? That's, like, kind of fucked up if you think about it. Imagine if during a pandemic for an illness that just, I don't know, makes your lungs take a huge L, Instagram was running ads from Marlboro saying cigarettes are like the bee's knees, and Costco was selling bulk containers of tobacco too for the price of one. That would seem insensitive, wouldn't it? Big conglomerates profiting off of vulnerable people by making them more susceptible to a specific illness during a crisis of that illness? What kind of individual would choose to do something like that? I'm not the first person to make a point like this. Blair White actually says almost the exact same thing in her video, albeit in regards to Cosmo magazine showing fat women on their cover with the caption,
"This is healthy." Now, this is amazing. This is just amazing. The fact that they would really release these in the midst of, I don't know, like a global health crisis. That little thing going around that's particularly dangerous for obese and overweight people. That thing.
She couples this with her hopes for health officials to do a better job at educating the public on how to improve their immune systems and exercise regularly. Credit where it's due, more so than Joe Rogan, Blair does try to look for the source of the obesity epidemic, and she does notice that some people might be profiting off of a manufactured issue. I agree with Blair that representation matters, if that is what she's saying in this video, although I'm not satisfied with her reasoning that Cosmo is somehow exacerbating the obesity epidemic. For one thing, if Blair does have evidence that shows that the positive representation of fat people in some way contributes to the prevalence of obesity, she doesn't show it. In fact, the studies that I've looked at say something closer to the opposite. Although we've spent the last 6 decades educating people on how fat and obesity are the physical manifestation of the sin of sloth, the numbers keep going up. Meanwhile, companies like Coca-Cola have started to do the public health equivalent of greenwashing their brands to try to positively associate themselves with health, even though they are among the primary beneficiaries of the increased rates of diabetes in this century millennia. In my opinion, Cosmopolitan is in no way comparable to some of the major players in food production and distribution. They're just showing fat people in a non-miserable state. Lastly, while Blair does invoke the responsibility of the government in her discussion, the solutions that she proposes have very little to do with what the government says or does. It's unclear to me how another public awareness campaign about how fat is bad is going to make gyms more affordable or healthier food more available to poor people. Sure, if we had closed down fast food restaurants instead of gyms during the pandemic, people might have lost weight. But we might have done that by pushing people to the brink of starvation and removing all their options for getting food outside of a 45-minute to 1-hour bus ride. In short, Blair does seem reluctant to fault people for having the bodies that they do, but the solutions that she proposes amount to very little more than doing just that. Not only does Blair not include peer-reviewed research in her video, the solutions that she suggests, I fear, would make people even more food insecure. So while I do appreciate that Blair is trying to look at the bigger picture and not blame individuals for social problems, I'm not sure that this amounts to much beyond cushioning her usual mean girl routine. The first half of her videos stresses the responsibility of non-fat people to be real with fat people and show tough love. She isn't clear on what tough love looks like in practice because she only describes what it's not. And what it's not is a happy fat woman telling you that you should be satisfied with who you are. So what is it then? Who knows? But let's be real for a second here. Blair, you're rich, you can afford to get over the paywalls for peer-reviewed journals. You have no excuse not to be doing research for your videos. Sorry, I was so monotone. It's really echoey in this bathroom. To a certain extent, I do think that talking about individual choice can be useful. I've been in a really rough place the last few months because in Canada we're experiencing a heat wave and the heat just always bears down on you. It's this constant, ever-present reminder that the future you're supposed to be living for may actually just be a distraction from the abyss beneath the very quaking, crumbling earth that you stand on. Self-help can make me feel like I have some sort of control over my life again, like I have agency. And that's why I always recommend that anybody with the means go to therapy. But that's where the value of self-help advice ends. It ends at its capacity to make the individual feel like they've regained some control over their individual perspective. Self-help advice can't change the world around the individual in any material way to ensure that certain choices are available to them to make in the first place. The high fructose corn syrup thing and the food desert thing are just two parts of the food economy gestalt, that is, the whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. It's the economy, it's the world. Food production and distribution are spread out over the entire globe, and they're controlled by some very powerful people. And one of the moving parts in that industry is fucking advertising, which has integrated psychology into its practice to warp your brain into thinking you need fucking Lay's chips. You've been feeling guilty because you bought them and they're over your fridge, but Lay's paid for that spot in your fucking brain. It paid for that spot above your fridge. Everybody, of course.
Ooh. Hey, Tracy. Woo! Ew, girl. Stop.
The second that we decided to call the higher proportion of obese people in the population an epidemic, we moved the conversation away from individual choice and onto the population. Sure, we can talk about how any individual choice might have changed the fate of the universe, but this thing is spun so far out of the control of any one individual that experts are saying the solution is to solve poverty. So as much fun as it is to make jokey jokes about fat people hitting the gym or putting the deep-fried foods down, it's not clinical advice, and it might be pointing in the entirely wrong direction. Look, I don't mean to imply that food deserts alone have led to a higher prevalence of obesity. In fact, most of the studies that I'll be citing, which will all be linked in the description, are skeptical of the concept, and they say that the causes of obesity are probably much more complicated than a single ecological phenomenon. That's the thing though, you know? Researchers are working on figuring it out. Experts who have dedicated their lives to figuring this out aren't even sure what to do, and none of the peer-reviewed studies that I looked at said that the answer to fat people is to administer tough love. You might be wondering at this point, well, Chip, this is all big picture stuff. How am I supposed to respond when Tess Holliday is on the cover of Cosmo magazine with the caption, "This is healthy"? Well, I've got a very simple solution for you. You're not even going to believe it. It took so much research for me to figure this out. I had to do equations. Okay, are you ready? Just shut the fuck up about other people's bodies. Part something. Shut the fuck up about other people's bodies. Look at me and tell me, do you think I'm healthy or unhealthy? Do you think that I'm a lazy person based on what you're seeing here? Go on, you can be honest. Not flirty, though. I can't do that. When I used to work my evening shifts at the game store from hell, I'd get off around 9:45, 10 o'clock, and I'd stop at a grocery store on the way home to pick up a cheesecake that could serve between 4 and 6 people. I would crush the whole fucking thing and then fall asleep in a food coma after rewatching a couple episodes of Karikano for the 50th time. I didn't exercise at that time either. Like, I would do maybe 15 sit-ups and 12 minutes of yoga every other day, accompanied with like a 30-minute bi-weekly walk. I gamed, I wrote, I watched movies. I've always had a very sedentary lifestyle. Somehow though, like at the time, I had rock hard abs, and you could see my ribs too. People would still approach me and tell me what their assumptions about my lifestyle were based on how my body looked to them. I've been mistaken for a gymnast and a ballerina multiple times. If only they knew the truth. So much more shameful than that. What's funny is that even when I told people what my hobbies were, nobody ever said to me, "You are clearly making unhealthy choices." Nobody even worried about my health unless I told them that I was worried about it. When I go to the doctor or the physiotherapist with injuries, they collect evidence before making a prescription. I was always given the benefit of the doubt, you know? Since the cheesecake years, I've developed multiple wrist injuries. In 2016, I developed a case of de Quervain's tenosynovitis in my wrist because I shoveled snow too quickly. Over the course of the pandemic, I'm pretty sure that I've developed some kind of RSI from typing too much and spending way too much time at my desk, but I'm too scared to go to the physiotherapist to check this. In 2019, I suffered a small tear in my ACL because I tried to have a secret dance party after months of doing neither stretching nor strength exercises. I've also been in therapy for 5 years sporadically for mental health issues. Whenever I've had insurance, I just go. I exercise now more than I used to in the cheesecake years because it keeps the pain out of my wrists, knees, and back. Back then, I only worked out on occasion because I was worried that someday I would become fat. It was never really about health for me when I worked out. Like, I was, and I still am, unsure about what it would mean for me if I became fat. Like, at this point in my life, being thin is part of my identity. And, like, that's not something that I chose for myself, you know? It's just that ever since I was a kid and I started to go through puberty and take on something resembling the form that I have now, people have made a point of telling me that they perceive me as a thin person, you know? It's been mostly uncomfortable and distressing, but if my body changed, I know it would be worse. I know that I do not want to be treated the way that fat people are treated. That is an example of my own fat-phobic thought processes. So, if at any point you're like, "I'm not fat-phobic, you self-righteous bitch," it's okay, I am too. Oh, also, I have problems with diarrhea because I drink too much coffee every day. The toilets are there for a reason, people. Most of my family also have similarly sedentary lifestyles, and they don't put weight on either. Even so, one of my normal-weighted relatives, who's, I guess, closer to the thin end of things, was recently diagnosed as pre-diabetic. Coincidentally, she drank a shit ton of Pepsi. When her doctor diagnosed her, he said, "You wouldn't expect it based on your size, but you have developed diabetes." At no point did her doctors ever ask her to lose weight or to eat healthier. In my family, being thin was never a choice. Our only option was to just be, and we could indulge in whatever unhealthy foods we wanted to. We never really had to think about our weight. Okay, so now with that said, did you guess any of that by looking at me? Do you know now what my cholesterol is like? What my sodium levels are? How my blood pressure is? You can be honest, and probably you should be honest. You don't know. You just don't know the specifics. To know if I'm really healthy or unhealthy, you'd probably have to run a bunch of tests on me and just get the really specific and important details. That's what those are there for, right? It also is confusing what exactly I mean by healthy when I say that. My joint health, my blood health, my brain health, my muscle health, these are all very different things. I'm bringing this up because we don't afford fat people the same level of nuance or the benefit of the doubt that we do for thin people. On the contrary, we're very, very comfortable making broad, sweeping generalizations about fat people's health based on only a cursory glance. How can we say that a fat person is healthy or unhealthy just by looking at them? I don't want to co-opt the conversation here. I'm bringing up my body and my health because I think lots of thin people can relate but may not have ever been asked to consider their experiences before. When you do get to think about this for a little while, you start to realize fat people have to go through some shit that thin people just don't. It's not due to any specific unifying health problem. Like, it's not that all fat people have a certain kind of heart disease, or that all fat people have a certain kind of sodium level that we're discriminating against. Instead, it comes from snap judgments that pedestrians make. Critics of the body positivity movement say they are concerned for the health of fat people, and this is why they push back against the increased visibility of fat people on public platforms. Supposedly, Tess Holliday having a successful career as an influencer will push other people to become fat. I don't believe that these concerns actually exist, though. If that were the case, I think we could see this principle applied evenly across all levels of society. We would see people critiquing gamers for their horrendous diets and sedentary lifestyles, and also generally toxic comport. When Ninja's braless wife brought him Doritos and a sandwich while he was playing League, nobody asked him, "Did you get up to stretch, Ninja? Did you make sure to eat your vegetables with your Doritos?" The principles that these criticisms seem to come from are very narrowly and selectively applied. If I became fat, I'm sure people would critique my lifestyle and express concern for my health, but they're not doing that now. And if it would be unhealthy when I was fat, surely it's unhealthy while I'm thin. But the way we do things now is we wait until people's bodies look a very specific way before we express concerns for their health. Remember, I am not disputing in this video that being overweight, fat, obese, or super obese can increase your risk of adverse health outcomes. I think you can even hold on to that belief without specifying what it is that you mean by health. Ultimately, none of that is incompatible with what I want to say, which is this. Whatever relationship there is between health and weight does not bestow randos with the ability to assess people's health by eyeballing their penises. That's an anatomical term for you. I learned that from somebody else. Like, it's a good idea to eat your fruits and veggies and to incorporate movement into your day. But that's the case no matter what your weight is. To be fat is to be a magnet for ridicule. As a society, we just fucking hate fat people. In the 1970s, along with, of course, the arrival of the obesity epidemic, something else was going on politically. The golden age of neoliberalism. The Roland Regine and Margaret Unions are terrorism Thatcher administrations, and of course, the Canadian equivalent Mulrooney government, were each characterized by their successful efforts to slash funding to the public sector and privatize public services like transit, healthcare, natural resources, space, time, military, and government, with the rationale that the government would save tons of money by not being responsible for these things anymore, and that would improve the health of the economy. These policies helped foster a culture where individual responsibility, individuals governing themselves, would be celebrated, and government would take a muted backseat priority. We would each individually handle the global trade network and international conflict. Just kidding. We would get to still buy things, except we would feel cooler while we did it. The problem to this foolproof approach to building society was that not everybody could afford to get in on the action and buy chunks of the public sector. The state still existed, like you presumably could still be arrested for pooping on a pop car. A pop car? Except now private companies were in charge of large swaths of day-to-day life that had previously been under the control of the democracy. This wave of privatization took public services that had previously been under democratic control, moved them over onto the market as commodities, and made them available to the governance of people who already had shit tons of money and power. A very small group of individuals gained the power of governments, without the accountability to the public that makes democracy so cumbersome. And, individual responsibility is one thing when you control the power grid that supplies millions of people with electricity or an entire city's transit network. It's another thing altogether when you feel guilty for buying clothes or you can't fucking afford broccoli. And with the economic reforms in the last half of the 20th century, something marvelous happened to our attitudes towards fat people. They started to reflect our current political dispositions. Can anyone guess how you do government in a society that's relinquished democratic control to the market? You buy shit, of course. You become a consumer. I don't mean to say that fat phobia was invented in the last, 50 years. Fat and thin have always been political nodes that have been colored by their context. The difference is that now, fat people represent a wrong kind of consumption that can only be corrected with different patterns of consumption. The expectation that we place on fat people is that they stop shopping at places like McDonald's and just ignore all those tempting advertisements and move their money over to Weight Watchers or a Planet Fitness membership. Do your civic duty and vote with your wallet in the dieting industry. Be a good citizen. And that's a pervasive attitude. It's not just something that we restrict to solving fat people. We say vote with your wallet to give game developers labor rights, to save the rainforests, to stop racism. That's why when we say fat is a choice, I think what we're really saying is fat is a shopping habit. So when Joe Rogan brings up the provocative image of the obese man in his underwear and calls him disgusting, I really have to wonder if that actually has anything to do with health. Disgusting isn't a medical diagnosis, it's a moral one. So, in one of the darker periods of my life when I would play Overwatch, if I did something that pissed usually a dude off, he would call me fat. And I could never take that personally. The person just never knew what I looked like, and I know I'm not fat, so... So even though I couldn't, take that as a comment on my actual body, I learned through my experiences that as an insult, fat means person I don't like. And that's super weird. How many of us would actually insult somebody by saying, you're unhealthy, you have the common cold? It doesn't register the same way. Unhealthy bodies aren't always disgusting to us. Let me tell you something about Carrie Fisher. She was super fucking hot, and in this image, she is just brimming with vitality. She looks absolutely healthy. She did so much fucking cocaine. She did cocaine on the set of The Empire Strikes Back Snow Planet. She also struggled with mental illness. Raise your hands if you would call Carrie Fisher disgusting. Fat phobia sparks that leap between fat and lazy, or fat and disgusting. You can see this in the comment section of that clip where Joe Rogan calls obese men disgusting. Fat people are lazy, lazy, lazy. Who among us isn't lazy, though? Fat people are disgusting. Fat people are failures. They have failed. Failed at what exactly? Failed in their careers? It's clear to me that when we say people are fat, lazy, and disgusting based on the way their bodies look to us, we're making judgments about who they are as a character in their entirety, based purely on the impression that we're getting about them from their bodies. So what is it about health that makes us tie it to morality? When we say someone's lazy, we're saying, you should be working. You ought to be doing something else. The reason that we think of unhealthy people as bad is because they have the wrong type of body. That's it. I'm not comfortable with thinking of health in terms of righteousness and sinfulness. And I'm sure some people intuitively feel that it's okay to consider unhealthy people bad and healthy people good. But the idea that we are all one health crisis away from being labeled a bad person is terrifying to me. This starts to have a dangerous effect on people's lives when your ability to make friends, find employment, or receive evidence-based medical care becomes dependent on people interpreting who you are favorably based on a cursory glance of your body. Fat isn't a good measurement for how good somebody is. Withholding kindness and respect from somebody and corralling all of who they are in that one dimension of their being, to treat that as a just reward for having a certain body, it's just discrimination. Fuck me if I'm not an SJW, but maybe we ought to evaluate who somebody is based off of their actions, their opinions, their beliefs, and how they treat the people around them. When we talk about fat and obesity, we lose sight of who people are outside of their bodies. I find it especially weird that we describe people who start to work out as people who are working on themselves. When I think of self-improvement, I think of gaining character traits, like becoming more patient, being kinder to people, being more accepting, or being more curious about the world around you and open-minded. I don't think of doesn't eat white chocolate, goes to the gym 4 days a week, lives outside the city and bikes in for a commute. I think of things that make us a warmer presence in the world, you know? And I've mingled with the other side. I know what the fitness community is like. I feel absolutely comfortable telling you guys that you are not people who have overcome all of your demons. You haven't mastered discipline in all aspects of your lives just because you have the time and the money to go to the gym 6 days a week and watch YouTube videos of random men with large muscles lifting weights in proper form. That's my hot take. Going to the gym isn't a personality trait. You still have a long way to go in cultivating your personality, even if you hit the gym fucking hard 6 days a week. I actually feel comfortable recommending Hannah Talks Bodies on TikTok. Her videos about fat phobia are informative, they're evidence-based, and she makes really valuable points like that fat people are less likely to receive evidence-based medical care. That is, doctors won't even test them to find out what their health issues are and will use the blanket recommendation lose weight, even for situations where that might not actually treat their problem. Presumably, if there are times when skinny people's injuries or illnesses have nothing to do with their weight, that must also be the case sometimes with fat people. If I'm somebody who claims to be concerned about the health of not just fat people, but everybody in my community, then I would logically turn my attention to the root causes of adverse health outcomes in the population. I spend quite a lot of time lurking in online communities that are based around eating disorder recovery and fat acceptance. Nobody is genuinely arguing that every possible weight that a human can be is healthy or unhealthy. Instead, I think that the focus is on how we have a culture that promotes self-hatred in people until they achieve a certain kind of body. And they want to distance us from this thing that we're doing, which is tying everything about who we are to our bodies. They want to say that you can be happy even if you can't have the body of your dreams. And moreover, they don't think people should be oppressed, denied access to employment or proper healthcare if they don't have a specific type of body. Something that I had to come to terms with while I was making this video was that it's possible that we could address every possible contributing factor that has led to the obesity epidemic on individual and collective levels. Even in that world, it's possible that the average weight of the world wouldn't change. That we would have just as many obese people as we did before the revolution. And if that were the case, I realized I don't care. I would rather that everybody on this earth stay for as long as possible and be fat than not be here at all. If I have to fucking stick around, then so do you, god damn it. A life without cake would break my heart. And who am I to tell somebody else not to enjoy life's delights? With that, I have here some lemon shortcake. Store-bought, of course. If I tried to bake, it would be a community-wide fire hazard. I would really appreciate if you would pause the video now and go get any snack that you possibly can, preferably one that you've been avoiding. It doesn't have to be the perfect snack, and not every bite has to be the best possible bite. All that matters is we are enjoying the pleasure of eating in good company. So, are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh my god. It was worth the wait. While we're eating, I just want to say, it's been a year since I opened my Patreon account. The reason why I did it was I felt like having someone with a financial stake in what I'm doing would stop me from deleting the channel. Also, I wanted money. Whenever I'm about to actually go through with it and delete the thing, I remember that you people have paid for your spots here and I stopped myself, so with affection to you, my little boogers, for making this video possible. Cooper Jones, Damian Mason, Eric, Femi, Joseph Abrams, Josie the Riveter, Pat Healy, Sheldon W, Shreya G, and Thomas. Take care of yourselves, folks.
That's the story of the little lad.